Shalom. First and foremost, I want to start by giving all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Shai Bahasham, Recha HaKodash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone who rule well, and peace and blessings to the hopeful elect, pushing this word with all truth, righteousness, and sincerity. Shalom, shalom. It's your brother Corner Walter of Great Millstone Charlotte Camp. Come with a quick lesson to the spirit and power of Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Shai. And just, one of the topics of the week, man, right? Let Nolan Wells be a cautionary tale, man, right? To never trust your enemy, right? We see the situation that took place with him, going to the spirit world, after a day hanging with these Edomites, man, right? Hanging with these people who didn't have his best interests at heart, right? Who wouldn't have thought twice, to let that man lose his life in that fashion, man, right? This it just tells you, this is who your enemy is, man, right? These people don't care about you, right? When it comes between you and them, they're gonna choose them 1,000 times out of 1,000, man, right? And they're gonna put you in compromising situations, right, to where your life may be in danger, man, right? But I wanted to, get the scriptures, man, because as the brothers have been going into, but elders, in all the camps, GMS, I've been saying the same thing, man, right? This man should have known better, man, right? His parents should have taught him better, right? Right, and truthfully, if he was following Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shai, he would have never put himself in a precarious situation of that magnitude, man. Right? Now this is Sirach 12 and verse 10. It reads, "Never trust thine enemy, for like as iron rusteth, so is his wickedness." Right? And those Edomites, man, right? The scriptures tell you they come out of the womb, right? Doing evil, man. Right? There's not a righteous bone in their bodies. They tolerate Jake. They don't, you can see in the picture, man. Right? They just tolerate him, man. Right? They don't think of him with any, esteem. Right? He one misstep away from finding himself at the bottom of a lake, man. Right? Because that's that hatred that's inside of them, man. Right? You one missed word, right? Making somebody jealous, embarrassing somebody, right? From losing your life, right? And that's what happens when you hang around these people who have that, that superiority complex that's rooted in inferiority, man, right? They know we're better than them, So anytime that shows, especially when they're in groups, right? When you get groups of Edomites together, no good is gonna come of it, man, right? Especially when Jake is involved, right? Especially when Jake has, slighted Esau in any type of way, man, right? That's how we get Nolan Wells. That's how we get, the Emmett Tills. That's how we get, even like, I've got family members and things of that nature, friends who have found themselves in the same situation, right? Some die, some haven't, but it's it's at the root of Esau's inferiority, man, right? So now he feels he has to compensate, man, right? And that's why, again, Ecclesiastes 12 and 10, "Never trust thine enemy, for like as iron rusteth, so is his wickedness," man. It says, "Though he humble himself and go crouching, yet take good heed and beware of him," right? They're always plotting, man, right? Regardless of if they're smiling at you, laughing and joking, they're always plotting, man. It says, "Yet take good heed and beware of him, and thou shalt be unto him as if he has wiped a looking glass, and thou shalt know that his rust hath not been altogether wiped away," right? So they can wipe it away. They can put these smiles on. They can claim themselves as so-called allies and things of that nature, man. But we know what their true intent is, man. Right? We know where their heart lies. We know what their parents are teaching them, man. We know what they talk about behind closed doors, right? They hate Jake, That's why it says, never trust your enemy. Everything they do is to directly disadvantage you, man. Right? It says, set him on not by thee, least when he hath overthrown thee, he stand up in thy place. Right? They want to get you out of the way, man. Right? Neither let him sit at thy right hand, lest he seek to take thy seat, and thou at thy last remember my words and be pricked therewith. Right? You know, and I'm sure Nolan was warned. Right? I'm sure he has Jake friends that told him not to be around these Edomites, man. Right? I think they were in Mississippi, if I'm not mistaken. Right? Yeah, south of Jackson County, off the Mississippi Gulf Coast. Right? So that deep south, right? You know, Jake grows up with these Edomites, man, right? I grew up around Edomites of that same nature, right? And they're gonna put on a good front in your face, right? But behind closed doors, they they're the same old Esau, man, right? The same way Esau said he plotted on his brother Jacob, man, right? That spirit never leaves them. You know, it just takes one incident for that to be riled up, right? It says, and like it says, and thou at thy last remember my words and be pricked therewith, right? Because when you find yourself in these situations, man, right, you're gonna think about these words, right? Nolan's last thoughts were probably that he shouldn't have trusted these dudes, man, right? But it was too late. Now he's in his right mind. He knows better now, right? But let this be a cautionary tale to Jake. You Israelites out there, man, right? you know, Southern Kingdom who think they can parlay with these Edomites, man, and come out unscathed, right? Northern Kingdom who think that just because you may be more fair skinned that they're gonna treat you in some type of way beneficial to you, right? This is the end result, man. And there's countless stories, right, of Jake who got too close to Esau, right, and got burned because of it, man, right? Both literally and figuratively, you know. It says, "Who will pity a charmer," verse 13, "that is bitten with a serpent, or any such as come nigh wild beast?" Right. So we don't pity you because you flew too close to the sun, so to speak, man. Right. It says, "So one that goeth to a sinner and is defiled with him in his sins, who will pity? For a while he will abide with thee, but if thou begin to fall, he will not tarry." Right. And this is what we see, man. Right. They're gonna be around, right? But as soon as things get shaky, they skedaddle, man. Right. They have places to go to. Right. They got judges and law enforcement family, right, to lean upon, man. Right. When situations get hairy. Right. They're gonna put you in compromising predicaments, right? And not care for your life, man. Because they know they have a way out, you know? An enemy speaketh sweetly with his lips, but in his heart he imagineth how to throw thee into a pit, right? And this happens time and time and time again, man. Every year, right, there's a Nolan Wells, right? Every few months, honestly, man, right? They just don't get reported, right? Because Jake grows up with these Edomites thinking that they in the same lane, right? Thinking they of the same ilk, right? And they find themselves dead in jail, right? In the hospital, things of that nature, right? Because they trusted in Esau, man, right? They trusted their so-called friendships and bonds, man, not knowing that these men, that are raised from the womb, right, to hate you, man, to despise you. It says, "An enemy speaketh sweetly with his lips, but in his heart he imagines how to throw thee into a pit. He will weep with his eyes, but if he find opportunity, he will not be satisfied with blood." Right. And think about the times that, before the internet, man, right? Where Jake would go missing, you know? Jake would be around Esau and disappear, right? Not make it home, right? Time and time and time again, man, right? This happens, right? It was a time. That's why they have things like sundown towns, man, right? They still have sundown towns in the South today, man. Right here in North Carolina, they still have sundown towns, right? Where you got to be inside before the sun goes down, right? Or you don't know what's gonna happen to you, man. Right? If you a person of color, you know, if you an Israelite, right? Because that's what the spirit is Esau versus Israel, man. Right? They see you, and they, like it says, they will not be satisfied with blood, man. Right? They want to get you out of the way, right? That's that hatred, that Esau has for Jacob, man. Right? Verse 17. If adversity come upon thee, thou shalt find him there first. Right? They plotting and scheming, man. Right? On your downfall. Right? In Psalms 83rd chapter is the overarching culmination of that, man. Right? On a global sense, right? On the nationwide sense. But even in your interpersonal, right? Esau is always plotting. Right? That's why you, even at the workplace, right? You deal diplomatically, right? But you don't get cozied up with Esau, man. Right? Because they always thinking of a way to undercut you, man. It says, and though he pretend to help thee, yet shall he undermine thee. Again, like I said, they going to undermine you. They're going to undercut you. These three here, right? They did not care about that man, boy. Like I said, right? He was in adversity, right? Regardless of the situation, right? They should have never, it should have been 4 people getting on that boat, right? No matter what the case was, man. But they allowed him to find himself in that water, man. And they undermined him, right? It says he will shake his head and clap his hands and whisper much and change his countenance, right? So as soon as they found out, right, that he wasn't going to make it, he became a reproach, man. Right? You see online, man, people making fun of the situation, man. Right? Like it says, he shake his hands, or he clap his hands, shake his head, whisper much, right? Their families, I'm sure, are talking behind the scenes, man. Right? Telling them that they did nothing wrong. Right? As the scriptures tell you, they're not in trouble as other men. Right? It's going to be a very slim chance, I'm sure, that these 3 face any type of judgment for this, man, right? On a legal level, Now the Lord is going to judge them, right? But when it comes to Esau's world, they're gonna get a slap on the wrist at the most, man. They already talking about there's no signs of foul play and things of that nature, right? So we know how this story goes, right? Jake trusted in Esau, right? Jake befriended his enemies, right? And they took advantage of that, man, right? And they weren't satisfied with blood, Now I wanted to get this here again, right? Let this be a cautionary tale, man, right? One of the many. Proverbs 26 and verse 23, right? Just going into, Jake getting, sweet talked by their enemy, man, right? Whether it be in business, whether it be personal, they're always going to be your enemy, right? And when the time comes to show their true colors, best believe they're going to shine, man, right? And you're going to see the devil for who he truly is. But sometimes it's too late, right? In Nolan Wells' case, it was too late when he saw, right, the devil and his so-called friends, right? It says, smooth words may hide a wicked heart, just as a pretty glaze covers a clay pot. People may cover their hatred with pleasant words, but they are deceiving you, right? Jake gets deceived, right, by the sweet talk, man, right? Come out on the boat with us, man. It's going to be girls. We're going to have drinks. It's going to be a good time, right? Come to this party with us, right? Come camping with us, right? Go on this road trip, right? You should never be in alone with Esau, man, right? Especially in numbers like that. It says they pretend to be kind, but don't believe them. They pretend to be kind, but don't believe them. That's it right there, right? So I don't care what they tell you. Never trust thine enemy, man, right? Or you're going to find yourself at the bottom of the lake, hanging in a tree, rolled up in the wrestling mat, right? Your organs being harvested, right? All from what? Trusting in Esau, man, right? Thinking these people are your friends, right? Now we don't go around, you know, maliciously, looking for interactions with Edomites, man, right? But we know how to separate ourselves when the time comes, man, right? You use subtlety, man, right? What's the word? Wise as a serpent, yet harmless as a dove, right? You move in a way to stay out of harm's way, man, right? And being surrounded by Esau is definitely harm's way, especially when you out there by yourself, man, right? And like the elder Hawad say, man, if you ain't with a brother, you by yourself, damn near, man, right? Even Jake in the world, right? Jake in the world, is against you, man, right? So if you're not with the brothers, there ain't really too much to be doing outside, man, right? Verse 25 again, Proverbs 26 and 25 in the NLT. They pretend to be kind, but do not believe them. Their hearts are full of many evils, man, right? It's only evil in their heart, right? There's only malice, right, that they can think of, man, right? And they're just looking for an opportunity to exercise it, right? And as soon as they find it, best believe they're going to capitalize on it, man, right? They've been doing it, for the better part of the last 400 years, right? They've been doing it since the Greeks, right? When they think of a wicked action, they're going to go above and beyond to execute upon it, man. Right? Especially when it comes to you Israelites, man. Right? You Negroes, Latinos, Native Americans, Hispanics, right? West Indians, right? You Israelite foreigners. These Edomites are always looking to bring your downfall, man, regardless of how close you think you might be, right? It says, while their hatred may be concealed by trickery, their wrongdoing will be exposed in public. And that's why we see these things coming to pass, right? Coming to the headlines more and more, right? To expose how Esau operates when they get Israelites in the presence, man, right? It's probably a 95%, a success rate when it comes to them offing Jake in this fashion. Because how many times do we not hear about the stories, man? Right? How many times does it get, swept under the rug, through, your parents being law enforcement or judges or having some type of influence in the community, right? An affluent Edomite is going to get away, with these different things, man, right? And just keep on moving, right? While Jake lost his life, right? He lost his so-called future, right? From hanging around his enemy, man, right? People who never had his best interest at heart, right? So just something quick, man, through the spirit, right? This being the topic of the week, rather, right? Let Nolan Wells be another cautionary tale, man, right? Never trust your enemy, man. So Lord willing, I was edifying through spirit and power of Yahweh Shemi. I was shy. I want to close by giving all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Shai Bahasham, Recha HaKodash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone who rule well and teach well, and peace and blessings to the hopeful elect pushing this word with all truth, righteousness, and sincerity. Shalom, shalom, Kwame Sharala, and the Abad Babal. Shalom.